This song, a setting of a sonnet by Shakespeare, is scored for mezzo-soprano, flute, clarinet, and viola. The instrumental introduction is the passage we will be studying here. It was written in the early years of Stravinsky's new interest in serial and 12-tone composition. The passage presents two contrasting melodies. The melody in the flute is smooth and lyrical, although with some large leaps. At the same time, the clarinet and viola share a contrasting melody, played mostly staccato and with the line tossed rapidly back and forth between the instruments. The first four notes in the flute melody, B, G, A, B flat, function as a referential series for the melody and for most of the rest of the song. It's labeled here as PB, the prime ordering of the series that begins on the pitch B. It opens up a space between B and G, and then fills that space partly in. Only the A flat is missing within the span. Starting at the end of measure 3, we hear the same four notes in the same order, and therefore with the same intervals. Here are the first four notes, and here are the last four. In between the two statements of the four-note series, we find a contrasting four-note series related to them by inversion. It's labeled I, A flat, the inversion that begins on the pitch A flat. Each interval in the original series, 8, 2, 1, is replaced in order by its complement mod 12, 4, 10, 11. That's the definition of inversion. What goes up by some amount in one goes down by the same amount in the other, and vice versa. Here's the melody as written, with big leaps. First four notes, middle four notes, and last four notes. The inversional relationship is easier to hear if the notes are all in the same register. So here is the same melody without the big leaps. First four notes, middle four notes, and last four notes. There are at least three reasons why Stravinsky may have chosen this particular inversion, the one that starts on A flat. First, the A flat fills in the gap within the original series. The inversion starting on A flat then creates its own gap. Its missing B is filled in when the first four notes return. Second, taken together, the two four-note series chromatically fill the span between G and C, G, A flat, A, B flat, B, C. PB together with I, A flat, contains every note between G and C. The relationship between G and C is the basis for the accompanying line also, as we will soon see. Third, the two series forms are related by the inversion that balances G against C. This is another hint of the importance of the relationship between G and C. Note that this same inversion also exchanges A and B flat. The last two notes of the original series return in reverse order as the last two notes of the inversion. The third series is the same as the first. They are related by T0. That's because when you invert something, then invert it again in the same way, you get back to your starting point. The second half of the melody is organized in a very similar fashion. Again, there are 12 notes where the first four and the last four are the same. In between, we have a contrasting four-note series form related to these by inversion, so the original intervals are replaced by their complements. Here's the melody as written with leaps. And here's the melody with the notes in the same register to make the inversion and the repetition easier to hear. Looking at the melody as a whole, we note that the first 12 notes and the last 12 notes are related by inversion around B. Everything the first 12 notes do above B, the second 12 do below B, and vice versa. Inversional symmetry thus plays a role within each half of the melody and between its halves as well. If we think of the first half of the melody as moving from B, the first note, down a semitone to B flat, the 12th note, we can think of the second half of the melody as moving from B, its first note, up a semitone to C, its last note. This sense of directed motion towards C is also important for the accompanying part, as we will see. You may have noticed how often the actual music, its rhythm and phrasing and articulation, contradicts this grouping into four-note units. Just considering the phrasing slurs, we have a group of 6, a group of 3, a group of 4, but the wrong 4, a group of 3, and only at the very end do we get two phrase groups that actually coincide with the four-note serial structure. And of course, the melodic leaps also obscure the four-note groups. For the sake of comparison, I offer a horrible hypothetical recomposition of Stravinsky's melody. My horrible version aligns with the four-note serial plan in rhythm and register, and highlights by contrast the extent to which Stravinsky's melody obscures it with its phrasing and especially its octave displacements and disjunct contour. Here's my version. And here's what Stravinsky actually wrote. Stravinsky's surface conceals rather than reveals the music's inner organization. And that sort of tense relationship among the structural levels is a persistent feature of his music and of musical modernism generally. It's a feature, not a bug. The serial scheme provides an underlying regularity that the melodic surface plays with and against. The music not only conceals its four-note serial organization, but it also seems to evoke and contradict a simple tonal prototype in C major, with a four-measure antecedent phrase and a four-measure consequent phrase. Stravinsky's melody toys with this implicit conventional prototype, rushing ahead or holding back, and thus deforming the regularities and symmetries of the prototype. Here's what I imagine to be the implicit underlying prototype. And here's what Stravinsky actually wrote. Let's turn now to the accompanying line, shared by clarinet and viola. Like the flute melody, this line is quite disjunct in contour, with lots of big leaps, and is further broken up by the frequent changes of instrumental timbre. But underlying that melodic activity is something very regular and systematic. The line just trots up and down the first 5 notes of a C major scale. Here's what it would sound like if all of the notes were in the same register. And here's what Stravinsky actually wrote, with all of its leaps. It is possible to think of that diatonic line in serial terms, as the presentation and transformation of a 5-note series, C, D, E, F, G. We could think of the ascending and descending patterns as related by retrograde, but I think it makes more sense to think of them as related by diatonic inversion. They are mirror images of each other within the C-G frame. C, D, E, F, G is the prime ordering. G, F, E, D, C is the inversion. A concern with inversion around C and G is something the two melodies share. The accompanying line has 6 statements of its diatonic 5-note series, while the flute melody has 6 statements of its chromatic 4-note series. The series in the flute melody alternate original and inverted presentations, and the first 2 statements are related by the inversion that exchanges C and G. The series in the accompanying line also alternate presentations, ascending and descending, and in a diatonic sense, they can also be understood as related by the inversion that exchanges C and G. The two parts also share a common interest in the space between C and G and in directing their motion towards C. The flute melody fills that space chromatically in its first three series statements, G, A flat, A, B flat, B, C. The accompanying line fills that space diatonically again and again, C, D, E, F, G. In the final measure, we hear that perfect fifth all alone as a cadential sonority. The flute melody directs its motion toward its final C by its large-scale inversional plan. The first half of the flute melody descends from B to B flat. The second half ascends from B to C. The accompanying line directs its motion towards C in its final descent through the diatonic fifth from G to C, and sustains that perfect interval at the end. We have a passage that pits two opposing lines against each other. At first glance, the lines seem entirely different from each other. One is built on a four-note series, the other simply trots up and down the first five notes of a C major scale. But gradually, we become aware that the lines have a good deal in common. Not only do they both consist of six statements of an underlying series, but they are both concerned with the space between C and G, and with C as a shared cadential goal. In the cadential perfect fifth, C-G, the lines seem to come together in mutual harmony. In this way, this song makes a wonderful musical analog for the Shakespeare sonnet that is its text. In this poem, the presumptively male narrator encourages his presumptively male friend to get married. He argues that a man and a woman are like two sounding strings on an instrument. They are different, but if properly tuned to each other, beautiful sounds can result. It would be hard to imagine a more apt musical realization of that idea of two contrasting melodies merging in, quote, the true concord of well-tuned sounds.